to see everyone. Very grateful for everyone spending time hearing. I will do my best to serve all of you. And I really appreciate Anand Bihari Prabhu how personal you are and in hosting this Srimad Bhagavatam every day, welcoming everyone personally. You know their
I'm
likes
I'm a
and dislikes and
radical
so
I'm a
on.
radical person, Louis.
Yes, I appreciate that very much. Let's start with the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We will read today from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 44th chapter, verse number 6. Tad bala abalavat yuddham sametaha sarvayoshitaha uchuhu parasparam rajan sanukampa varutashaha. My dear king, all the women present, considering the match an unfair fight between the strong and the weak, felt extreme anxiety due to compassion. They assembled in groups around the arena and spoke to one another as follows. Next verse. Mahanayam bata adharma esham raja sabha sadam ye bala abalavat yuddham rajno anvichanti pashyataha. The women said, Alas, what a greatly irreligious act the members of this royal assembly are committing. As the king watches this fight between the strong and the weak, they also want to see it. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. The idea the ladies are expressing is that even if the king somehow wanted to see such an unfair match, why should the respectable members of the assembly also desire to see it? These feelings are natural. Even nowadays, if in a public place we find a violent fight going on between a very strong, large person and a weaker, smaller person, we are aroused to indignation. Compassionate women are especially offended and enraged by such unfair violence. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesh Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shvasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Shri Shada Murlidhar Shri Gaurachandra Mahaprabhu Varan Nrsimhadev Bhagwan Ki Jai Assembled Vaishnavas Ki Jai Arjuna Prabhu and Adi Purusha Prabhu, I offer my prostrated obeisances to you, senior devotees, and I offer my prostrated obeisances to all the other devotees who are here. I don't see everyone. I think I see Bhima Prabhu and Damodar Priya Devi and others. My obeisances, and I seek your blessings so that I can speak words that are enlivening to all of you and pleasing to the hearts of our beloved deities. Hare Krishna. So, today, I'm actually going to speak very briefly on the actual verses and on something else that's coming up tomorrow, with your permission. Because this chapter that we are in is going to develop, and we'll see the fight between Chanura and Mushtika and Krishna and Balaram happen. And Chanura and Mushtika were like huge, gigantic men, and Krishna and Balaram were little boys by comparison. And so the women of the court who were assembled there, they felt their heart stirring with compassion, and they felt that this fight was grossly unfair. And even if the king wanted to see it, that is King Kamsa, why should the respectable members of the assembly also have to see it? Because back then there was still some respectability, that respectable people would do certain things and not do certain things. Today we see in public life and in private life, the boundaries are very much blurred. Anyone can do anything they want. It's, even religion, do what pleases you and select the pieces and items that you agree with and leave out the rest. It's kind of like, making a complicated dish or even a simple dish and ignoring the recipe because you don't like certain steps. And then you say, well, I don't like adding this spice or boiling the vegetable in this particular way. And so I'm just going to do it my way. Well, guess what? The recipe might come out in some way, shape, or form as food, but it's not really going to taste like what it was supposed to taste like. So, similarly, um, when it comes to religion, Srila Prabhupada tells us very clearly, the Bhagavad propounds that religion is what is propounded by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is not something that is concocted by man or woman. And so we see in this assembly, in this chapter, it's going to lead up to the killing of King Kamsa by Krishna, his nemesis. And we will hear more about that in the coming days. And so I won't get into the story. And yesterday, Balkrishna Prabhu set up this chapter. And so, with your permission, I'm actually going to launch into something else. But before that, I'll make one point. It talks about the compassionate women in the assembly; their hearts burned. And we see that generally women are more compassionate because that's their nurturing side. Again, it's Kali Yuga, so the distinction between men and women in being unkind has started to blur as well. But we generally see that the father figure is the one who sets goals and kind of lays down the law in the family, and the mother is the one who loves unconditionally and tries to shelter the child from the law, so to speak, even if the child might have done wrong. And there are various reasons why we go through um, Srimati Radharani to approach Sri Krishna. That's one of the reasons, because Radharani, as merciful as Krishna is, Radharani is even more merciful. She's the divine mother, and we take shelter of her and we approach Murlidhar through her. So let me share my screen again. Can folks see my PowerPoint on Bihari Prabhu?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So tomorrow is the confluence of 4 different anniversaries. Tomorrow is Gopashtami and the disappearance day of 3 prominent Vaishnava acharyas. Sri Gadadhar Das Goswami, this is not Gadadhar Pandit from the Panchatattva. This is Gadadhar Das Goswami, one of the associates of Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya. Sri Dhananjay Pandit and Sri Srinivasa Acharya. So it's their disappearance day. And in Vaishnav observance and practice, the appearance and disappearance of an Acharya is observed equally in terms of its sacredness and in terms of the inspiration and blessings that come from that particular personality on that day. So even if it's the disappearance, we know that Vaishnava Acharyas, they are emissaries from the spiritual world. They come to this planet to enlighten us, and then they go back to the spiritual world, or they go wherever Sri Krishna wants them to go next. So I wanted to talk about not Gopashtami, because tomorrow's speaker is going to speak about Gopashtami, but I want to talk about the 2 acharyas here and then Srinivasa Acharya briefly, because Srinivasa Acharya is a more famous acharya about whom there are many lectures, but I thought it would be interesting for us to meditate upon these 3 acharyas today. So before we do that, I wanted to talk about why it is not just nice, but vital to hear about Sri Krishna's devotees. Hearing about the Lord and his pure devotees has the same result. How do we know that? In Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 13th chapter, 3rd verse, Vidura is addressing Maitreya Muni, his guru. O best of the virtuous, the original king of kings, Manu, was a great devotee of the personality of Godhead, Hari. And thus, it is worth hearing of his sublime character and activities. Please describe them. I am very eager to hear. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam is full of the transcendental topics of the personality of Godhead and his pure devotees. In the absolute world, there is no difference in quality between the Supreme Lord and his pure devotee. Therefore, hearing the topics of the Lord and hearing of the character and activities of the pure devotee have the same result, namely the development of devotional service. One must hear about pure devotees of the Lord, not just that it's nice and so on, but one must. The next verse, after the one we just heard, Vidura is saying, persons who hear from a spiritual master with great labor and for a long time must hear from the mouths of pure devotees about the character and activities of pure devotees. Pure devotees always think within their hearts of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, who awards his devotees liberation. From the purport, the devotees, however, realize the presence of the Lord, and therefore they can always see the lotus feet of the Lord within their hearts. Such pure devotees of the Lord are as glorious as the Lord. They are, in fact, recommended by the Lord as more worshipable than he himself. Worship of the devotee is more potent than worship of the Lord. It is therefore the duty of the transcendental students to hear of pure devotees, as explained by similar devotees of the Lord, because one cannot explain about the Lord or his devotee unless one happens to be a pure devotee himself. Now, at this point, I would like to introduce a point. You might be sitting here saying, well, that's all very good, but Yasoda Dulal is hardly a pure devotee. He's, other devotees might call him a devotee, but he's not really a devotee. He's trying to be a devotee. So, how does this work? So, there was a question that someone had asked my spiritual master, His Holiness Radhanath Swami, some years ago. Um, this person asked, like, sometimes we sit in the temple and we hear Srimad Bhagavatam from devotees who we know because we live with them or we associate with them or serve with them. We know they have faults and they're less than pure. They have other desires and so on. So, is it recommended we should hear or not from these devotees? And my Guru Maharaj said, as long as the devotee is repeating the words of previous acharyas who are pure devotees, their words and their Srimad Bhagavatam class will have potency. So rest assured, my dear devotees and friends and spiritual teachers, it is wonderful to hear about prior, acharyas and transcendental pure devotees, as long as I stick to quoting from what pure devotees in the past have written about them, which is what I will try to do and not introduce any concoctions. Every word of the Bhagavatam. This is now from the fourth canto, 12th chapter, 44th verse. The great sage Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, whatever you have asked from me about the great reputation and character of Dhruva Maharaj, I have explained to you in all detail. Great saintly persons and devotees very much like to hear about Dhruva Maharaj. Before we go to the purport, it's described in Chaitanya Leela how Lord Chaitanya would go when he was in the last 18 years of his manifest presence on this planet. He was in Jagannath Puri and he was in the Gambira and he was just surrounded by his close associates. And every day he would go to hear Srimad Bhagavatam recited by Gadadhar Pandit, one of the Panchatattva. And it's described that Mahaprabhu would listen to the tales, the section of the Bhagavatam which talks about the stories of Prahlad Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj again and again. Even though Gadadhar Pandit would have finished these sections, he would tell him, please go back and repeat the entire story and all the prayers and all the lessons all over again. So you can see Maitreya Muni is telling Vidura, he's saying great saintly persons and devotees very much like to hear about Dhruva Maharaj. And we see that the Lord himself, Lord Chaitanya, he would love to hear about Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj. And so this shows us the relish with which great personalities listen to pastimes and stories about pure devotees. From the purport by Srila Prabhupada, neophyte devotees simply try to understand the pastimes of the Lord and are not very much or not very interested in hearing about the activities of his devotees. But such discrimination should not be indulged in by any real devotee. A sincere devotee should read every chapter and every word of Srimad Bhagavatam, for the beginning verses describe that it is the ripened fruit of all Vedic literature. Devotees should not try to avoid even a word of Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I don't know if other devotees have had the same experience or not, but in across my readings of the Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes I struggle with certain sections because I find them a little, I'm ashamed to say, boring, because especially things like the lineages, like the rattling off of multiple names, like so and so was the king of this and the daughter of this and the son of that and the aunt and the uncle and so on and so forth. And you're like, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, wait, can we get to the juicy part, please? Like, not, let's get on with this, because as soon as I've read those names, honestly, 15 minutes later, I probably couldn't remember even 5% of them. And so I asked His Holiness Swayam Bhagwan Keshav Swami when he was in New York, New Jersey recently, how to approach this, because it says every word of the Bhagavatam is nectar, but somehow the nectar doesn't seem to come out within these sections, and how to approach it. And he said, you can view it in a couple of different ways. One is it establishes, the Bhagavatam is trying to establish the lineage of these great personalities that it talks about, so that the listener can always remember that this is not some random personality who's plucked out of thin air and the Bhagavatam is talking about them. There is a transcendental connection to other devotees and to the Lord Sri Krishna. And then the other thing that he mentioned, which I thought was super interesting, he said that the listeners of the Bhagavatam, when these names were being narrated by Shukadev Goswami or Sutta Goswami, as the case may be, they were actually able to relate because they knew some of these people personally or had heard about them, or they were in their own family. So when they heard these names, instantly they remembered these personalities in a transcendental way, and they could immediately picture their connection to Sri Krishna or one of his incarnations. And so the mood evoked in them was a devotional mood. And so Maharaj was saying that if we approach the Bhagavatam in that way, even some of these sections, we can put them in context and we can realize the purport and the import of what Prabhupada just said in that purport, that every word of the Bhagavatam has to be read very nicely and savored. So I thought I would interject that before sharing the next section. Let me interject and see if there are any questions or comments so far. I've got a few slides more, and then I'll stop for questions.
No, it was perfectly clear. Thank you, Yasoda Prabhu. Very helpful.
Thank you. So I wanted to go to the next slide. Why is there so much emphasis in hearing about devotees? So we saw already devotees are very dear to Krishna. He loves them being glorified. Life of devotees is inextricably linked to Krishna. It's a 2-for-1 deal. We all like deals. You get to hear about Krishna and about devotees, because you will never hear about a pure devotee and not hear something about their connection with Krishna, how they seek inspiration and shelter from Sri Krishna, and how they serve the Supreme Lord. So when you hear about that, you get appreciation for both the Lord and that particular devotee. The third point is we might find the concepts and the precepts of bhakti impractical unless we see them in action or unless we see them modeled. Different devotees show how to live a life of bhakti differently. As you'll see when you read Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a wide variety of devotees that is talked about. somewhere in that we can find someone that inspires us. And we can say, aha, I want to learn more about them. And maybe I can incorporate some things that they said or how they lived into my life of bhakti so that my life becomes a dynamic, rich life full of actual practice and not just theory. And this goes to the point where Mahaprabhu says in Chaitanya Charitamrita, when he's on that South Indian tour, he says, Yare dekha tare kaha Krishna Upadesh, that we tell everyone we meet from our position of realization or whatever we have heard. And Srila Prabhupada has talked about this verse so many times. If you search for this in Veda base, you'll see that he again and again explains that we don't have to manufacture anything. Simply repeat what Krishna has said in Bhagavad Gita or what has been said about Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam. And anyone we meet as appropriate, because obviously we live in the material world, we work and we study or whatever. So there's a limit or a way that we can say this. But if we can introduce something, then that shows people how Krishna Bhakti can be modeled. And we can model it not just through our words, but through our actual life and our character. In fact, as St. Francis of Assisi says, I preach all the time, and when necessary, I open my mouth to speak. So people see devotees, and as aspiring devotees ourselves, the life that we live and the character that we display, not just in good situations, but in tough situations, actually exemplifies a life of bhakti. And it can actually inspire or deflate someone who is watching us or someone who knows us and sees how we react. So that's a food for thought. And that's why the emphasis on hearing about devotees so that we can get inspired in different ways and find some inspiration that connects to our heart and where we are in our stage of bhakti. Oops. So the first devotee that I wanted to talk about is Sri Gadadhar Das Goswami. Gaur Ganodesh Deepika by Kavi Karnapura mentions Gadadhar Das as the extension of Srimati Radharani's beauty and luster. He was a unique personality who was a close associate of both Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. When you read Chaitanya Leela, you'll see that the two lords have some associates who span both of them. Obviously, whether they are, anyone is Lord Chaitanya's personal associate or Lord Nityananda's, they love and respect the other Lord very much. But the mood of some of the closest associates of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda were unique to those two lords. So Lord Nityananda's associates, they were more in the Sakhya Ras, and they were cowherd boys from a past, from Krishna Lila, whereas Lord Chaitanya's associates were more in the Madhurya Ras, and they would help the Lord by narrating pastimes of the gopis' interactions with Krishna, and narrate things like Gopi Geet and so on. But Gadadhar Das Goswami was a unique personality who was a close associate of both the lords in that sense. He is described as a united form of Chandrakanti, who is the effulgence of Srimati Radharani, and Purnananda, who is an expansion of one of Lord Balaram's dear girlfriends. Krishnadas Kaviraj describes Lord Chaitanya as Radha Bhav Dyuti Suvalita, characterized by the emotions and bodily luster of Srimati Radharani. That's Lord Chaitanya. And this luster was exemplified or embodied by Srila Gadadhar Das Goswami. He was always absorbed in the mood of the Vraja Gopis. Sometimes he'd be walking on the path and he would have a pot of Ganga water on his head, and he would be absorbed in the mood of being a gopi, and he would be calling out like, does anyone want to buy milk? Does anyone want to buy yogurt? Because he was thinking, I'm carrying milk products on my head, because he thought of himself as a Vraja Gopi. When Mahaprabhu sent Nityananda Prabhu to Bengal to preach the nectar of the holy name, he sent Sri Ramdas and Sri Gadadhar Das with him. And Sri Gadadhar Das Goswami delivered countless Yavanas and Malechas in Bengal. And we don't have time because we have a few more minutes before I have to stop for questions. But I will tell one story. Sri Gadadhar Das used to be always in ecstasy, and he was a very joyous personality. It wasn't like an artificial mood of like, I'm above everything. He was truly living in the life of bhakti. He was truly immersed in love for Krishna. And so, in that mood, he one day in the evening, he went and he was doing kirtan outside the house of the Qazi, who's kind of like the governor of the state. And the Qazi, he was a Muslim, and he didn't particularly like things like kirtans and all that, and he detested the Hindus. And so the Qazi angrily sent someone to, his people to stop Gadadhar Das or beat him up or send him away or something. And Sri Gadadhar Das just burst into the house. And he was so full of joy that Qazi just stopped in astonishment. And so he said, "What do you want?" And Sri Gadadhar Das told him, Mahaprabhu and Nityananda have come here to this earth to deliver everyone, even the most fallen, by simply chanting the name of Hari. I want you to chant the name of Hari. And the Qazi, he was, his anger was gone. He was astonished at seeing his mood. And he said, "Why don't you go away tonight? Like, go home and, rest peacefully. Tomorrow I will chant the name of Hari." And then Sri Gadadhar Das started dancing in ecstasy. He says, "Why tomorrow? You've already chanted the name of Hari. You thought you were going to send me away, but you've already started chanting." And he was in so much joy. The Qazi was struck by the mood of bhakti, and he actually had a change of heart, and he surrendered to Sri Gadadhar Das and actually became a devotee from that interaction. The next personality is Sri Dhananjay Pandit. He's described as an extraordinarily great Vaishnava. And Chaitanya Bhagavat describes that Sri Nityananda Ram took a permanent residence in his heart. Krishna's friend Vasudham became Dhananjay Pandit in Gauralila. That's what Gaur Ganodesh Deepika says. Dhananjay Pandit was Nityananda Prabhu's dear servant. He was very renounced and full of love for Krishna. Chaitanya Charitamrita describes this. Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat describes Dhananjay Pandit as Vilakshana Mahanta. Vilakshana is great, and Mahanta is a great personality. Vilakshana is actually boundless. So having all the characteristics of a great personality. And Sri Dhananjay Pandit took part in Lord Gaurachandra's Navadvip Kirtan pastimes before he went to Vrindavan on the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's described, he carried only a kamandalu with him, which is that water pot, which is used to, for washing as well as for drinking from. And he remained absorbed in love of Sri Krishna and Sri Chaitanya, and he traveled widely and preached. He established deities of Gaurnitai, Sri Gopinath and Damodar, and taught people how to worship them. In Vrajalila, he is Vasudham, one of Lord Balaram's Dwadasha or 12 Gopalas. And the last personality I want to talk about today is Sri Srinivasacharya. He's a very famous personality. Some of you might have heard um, in the context of three great personalities who started the Sankirtana movement. So he's one of them. He's described as the Abhinna, that is non-different Kalevar or body or identical body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srinivasacharya was invited to come to this world from the spiritual world personally by Lord Chaitanya. Srinivasacharya was a prominent disciple of Srila Jiva Goswami. So on the altar, when at your home or when you go to the Bhakti Center, you'll see the six Goswamis, a picture of six or drawings of six Goswamis on the altar. So Srila Jiva Goswami was one of the six Goswamis. And Srinivasacharya was a prominent disciple of this great personality. He had many illustrious disciples himself. There's quite a list. One of his disciples was King Bir Hambir, who he converted along with his entire kingdom to Vaishnavism. And there is a story which we don't have time to go into, where the books that were written by the Goswamis and sent along with Srinivasacharya to be distributed in Bengal, made copies and distributed in Bengal, they were stolen by dacoits employed by this king Birhambir, who thought that there must be some valuable treasure because it's being guarded so well. And there was valuable treasure, but not the kind that he was looking for. And so these books were stolen while Srinivasacharya and his associates were asleep. And there was a frantic search because in those days there were no digital copies and multiple printed copies. It was all handwritten books, painstakingly written by the Goswamis. And he was in utter despair until he discovered that the king himself had ordered these books to be stolen. So then he went and spoke to the king and had a dialogue with him. And the king was struck by his saintliness. And he fell at his feet and said, I was the one who ordered these books stolen. You can have them back, and please accept me as your disciple. I'm going to stop this life of thievery and preying on others, and I want you to initiate me and I'll become a Vaishnava. And his entire kingdom became Vaishnavas as a result of Srinivasacharya's power. Another interesting thing is Srila Srinivasacharya's daughter, Hemalata Thakurani, was also a guru herself. In our lineage, we have many female gurus, not just Srimati Janava Devi, who is the consort of Sri Nityananda Prabhu. We have others. Gangamata Goswamini is another. Hemalata Thakurani, she was also a guru. So it's absolutely in our lineage that we have female gurus because our first teaching in Vaishnavism is that we are not this body. Men and women have roles, but ultimately we are not male or female. We just have these bodies, but we are eternally Prakriti or energy meant to be enjoyed by the divine Lord Sri Krishna. After Mahaprabhu's departure, after Mahaprabhu left, Mahaprabhu carried out his work of spreading Krishna consciousness through Srinivasacharya. And it is said that there were two expansions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu broadly. The first are the six Goswamis, and the secondary expansion of his mission was through Srinivasacharya, Narottam Das Thakur, and Shyamananda Prabhu. These are the three famous personalities that I mentioned earlier that some of you all might have heard classes about these three. And these three were the original pioneers of Sankirtana through large parts of India. With this, I will pause and ask for any questions, comments, or corrections.
Thank you, Yasoda Dulal Prabhu. Vanisha, have your hand up.
Is there, so for tomorrow, is there anything that is recommended to acknowledge this confluence of great devotees? Anything specific?
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything specific. Anyone on this call is aware of that? But we can pray to them for
Yes.
Their mercy and blessings.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bhima Prabhu.
Haribol Prabhu.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for giving us this concise history. Very quickly, Srivas, he had this wonderful pastime, which has much import into our modern life. And with Lord Chaitanya, you know the 1, 2, 3, this pastime? Could you
Why
tell
don't
it?
you narrate it? Why
No,
don't you
no, no,
narrate it?
no. This isn't my class. This is you.
No.
This is you.
Hey,
Please tell.
I'm not very. So, number one, is it Srivas or Srinivas that you were talking about? Because
I
Srivas is a
think it,
different personality.
yes, I think it was Srivas, right? Yes.
I'm not recollecting the details. So that's why I said, why don't you narrate it?
Oh no, I don't. No, I cannot take over this class by narrating
Well,
something.
there was a
Yeah.
pastime by Srivas Pandit, one of the Panchatattva, 1 to 3. It was in the context of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu going to him one day and saying, Srivas, you're a grihastha, and yet I only see you, doing devotional service and serving the devotees, and you don't do anything for your maintenance. How are you going to eat? and how are you going to feed your family? And so Srivas smilingly said, I'm going to step out into the courtyard. And he clapped, 1, 2, 3. And Mahaprabhu said, what is that? He said, I'm clapping my hands and seeing if anything comes. The Supreme Lord feeds the bees and the birds and the animals. And he said, he will feed me. Why would I go starving if I serve him? And Mahaprabhu was thrilled with that answer. And he said, you have purchased me with your devotion. And he said, even if the goddess Lakshmi has to go begging in the marketplace in the streets of Navadvip for your maintenance, you and your family will never see penury or poverty, and you will always be maintained. Is that the pastime you are thinking of?
Yes, I just feel that in our lives, there's sometimes decisions that have to be made where we sacrifice sadhana, we sacrifice the association of devotees because more money is to be made elsewhere, and we sacrifice time for service because more money is to be made elsewhere that we justify as somehow supporting our maintenance. But that Srivas's pastime is important for us to remember that if we take care of Krishna, Krishna will take care of us.
Mhm.
And
Thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah, and of course, all these pastimes, they're meant to be heard contextually and applied contextually, right? Different people are at different stages of life, and they might have to do what is appropriate materially. But that's why we have the association of devotees, where we can actually ask for guidance and even just to clarify concepts. Like, hey, this is the situation I'm facing. What should I do? And we should all cultivate at least 1 or 2 or 3 relationships where we can ask these questions without fear of being judged. Anyone else?
Yasoda Dulal Prabhu is an acharya of working in an outside world as a Vaishnava. So if you have questions about that, Yasoda Dulal is the right person to ask.
Ask
Damodar
questions about the real acharyas, not malechas.
Hare Krishna, dear
Hare
Yasoda
Krishna.
Prabhu. Makes me so happy to have your virtual association again. I always find your classes inspiring, and especially as what Ananda Bihari Prabhu mentioned, especially when you talk about your anecdotes of how you do bhakti out in your job or like with your regular life. That's always been very inspiring to me. So my question is kind of related to that. You talked about how one of the themes of the verses that you read today were of the heart stirring in compassion due to unfairness. And there was the whole idea of like, especially those of us in women's bodies, kind of having that experience more. As you said, it's Kali Yuga, so it's not always the case, but and I'm experiencing that in the sense that we have neighbors who where we live, we're down in Florida in Alachua, and in the area where we live, it's very common for people to keep their dogs outside and to not care for them as we usually do, keeping our pets indoors and kind of spoiling them. Yes, exactly, like how Bhima treats Rama, who's right there next to him. They're kind of neglected.
Yeah, he lets him drive.
I don't think so, but they're kind of neglected in my opinion, in the sense that they're just not they're treated almost as things as opposed to living beings, and I really struggle with it because I hear these dogs crying or barking, and we've called animal control, we've done all these things, and I don't know what else to do because the neighbors that do this, we've been told in the neighborhood that they, like they're not people you want to talk to, that they're involved in things that you don't want to deal with. And I won't go into details, but you kind of get the sense of it. Like they're not people that you want to associate with. So I don't know what else to do. And I'm just wondering if there's any advice on that.
Yeah.
I know it's very specific, so I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. Your compassionate heart, made you ask this question. I mean, you do the best you can, And, especially if they are not people that you can talk to, there's only so much you can do. And our time in this life and in this body is limited. And we should, instead of like trying to, bang our head against a wall that's not yielding, we can pray for the dogs, we can try and give them prasad or do whatever we can practically. But when it's not possible, we should then reserve our compassion or spread our compassion to those who are more receptive. I don't know if that satisfies your question.
Thank you. I know it's a very difficult one, and I do appreciate that. We do pray for the dogs, and when we do kirtans for our deities, I'll often at the end say to Krishna, please, Krishna, like take care of these dogs however you feel can be helped. So thank you. And I think Bhima Prabhu has something.
I just wanted to say that I had a specific incident. I'll make this very quick. Where on the opposite side of the lake in which I lived, somebody kept a dog for 12 years on a 6-foot chain. And we used to walk by that dog every day. And it was the saddest thing in the world. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. I'd bring prasadam. I would always make sure that they never gave the dog water. It was awful. And I prayed and I prayed. And then one day my wife gave me the vacation money and said, make him the offer. He can't make the owner an offer he can't refuse. Now, this is, of course, one dog, and you can't save them all. But we ended up taking that dog for an extraordinary amount of money, and that dog knew he was saved from this. And of course, he lived the life of Riley after that, and it was an unbelievable heart-opening thing that we should find. We should find situations where we can do something about it. And I think what Prabhu said about prasad, that's how it began. For 6 months, every day we would walk by and I would drop off prasad and hang with the dog and do that. And sometimes if you can just spend a little time, remember, as Nityodita Prabhu told me once, when I lost a dog, I was beside myself because it was my fault. He says, you don't understand how lucky that dog was, the rocket ship he took towards Krishna by being in association and having prasad, that these animals, just by that moment's association with you, Prabhujini, that from that prasadam, it's magic. It brings them in their next life possibly to become in the association of devotees once again, and possibly even devotees as they are. So in that moment that you have to share prasad, your time, the mantra, your prayers, you are doing so much for this entity's life cycle in his or her advancement towards Krishna. Hare Krishna.
The same goes for hamsters, horses, all the pets, all the animals, all the abused ones. Venetia, that's Whiskey Prabhu.
only animal.
Whiskey Prabhu.
And I will tell you this, Srila Prabhupada says, since Adi Purusha Prabhu, who feeds the homeless and has done so for so many years and thousands of people, Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk once told Siddhanta Prabhu, and I've narrated this story before, even on this forum, that he told Siddhanta Prabhu, the Prabhupada disciple who does the memories, DVDs and films and so on. So he told him on a morning walk that when an animal or a bird gets prasad, they get a human form of life, short-circuiting all their future karmic lives. They get a human form of life in their next life. When a human being gets prasad, they become not just a human in their next life, they're born in the family of a devotee. So that is why we should always distribute prasad to everyone we meet.
So I actually have a chance in my next life?
We all have a chance.
Is that what you're saying?
We all have a chance.
I can't, oh, glory, I have a chance.
I see Nayan Manjari is about to blow the conch. We'll see beautiful deities.
Yes, darshan time, dear devotees. Yasoda Dulal Prabhu, thank you. Wonderful class. Very hope-given, Shastric, bona fide. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai. श्री श्री राधा मुरलीधर गौरचंद्र महाप्रभु राम सिमदेव भगवान की जय।
Turn on your cameras, please. Bring your pets. Bring those souls to the camp. Yeah, Tina and Narayani, there they are. Hare Krishna. Ganesha, good to see you. Jeffrey Eckler praying for us all. Domi, thank you very much for facilitating the darshan. So the takeaway is that if an animal gets prasadam, they become human in their next life. Bhima Prabhu, do you think that's how I got my human form?
We shouldn't speculate.
I can speculate. Yeah. I can't speculate, but Bhima can. He can speculate, no problem.
Who said you had a human form, Prabhu?
Yeah, I'm subhuman. You're right. You're
No,
right.
you're
Well, I
definitely
want to have you as my
demigod.
son.
You're living in heaven,
Demigod.
Prabhu. You're due for a fall.
Yeah.
Down to our planet.
Thank you. I want to have you as my son, Bhima Prabhu, sometime in the future.
Oh, Lord. Will you spoil me like you spoil your daughter?
Yeah.
As long as I can have the meals that you have at your house, cooked by your wonderful, wonderful wife. Some people live in a
Krishna
heavenly
will fulfill
planet.
that desire.
Hare Krishna.
I will excuse myself unless there are any questions or comments.
Thank you. Yasoda.
Thank you.
Wonderful class. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, it's Sunday, everybody. Chant for Krishna, give prasadam to others, especially animals. Dance for Krishna and come again tomorrow, Monday morning. The weather is going down, but please still come. Don't be discouraged. Hare Krishna.
Don't forget to give prasadam to the humans too. they'll become devotees in their next life or give birth to a devotee family. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Prashanam for all. Okay. Hare Krishna.
There is hope.
There is hope. Hare Krishna.